Good morning, everybody. Welcome to New Year's Eve program. I just got out of the shower, I'm confessing. So it seemed more important to be here than to take the time to look more presentable. I hope you forgive me. It was one of those mornings. So I'm really happy to be here. The reason I'm so late is because I decided I should do my own practice first, and it kind of got me behind everything. But internally, things are better than ever. So I'm happy to share that to begin with. So let's meditate. Take your attention inside. And let's go all the way down to the tip of the tailbone. And this is an energetic center to cultivate because it grounds us deeply into Mother Earth. And we are here. So being completely here, completely grounded in our bodies, gives us the opportunity for that experience of be here now. Be here now. So we feel into this energy center. And it's very important that we understand that what we create in our life on the outside begins on the inside, not the reverse. If it's the reverse, our life is reactive rather than creative or proactive. So feel into the energy center at the base of the spine and breathe into that center, allowing your attention to rest between the breaths. As you allow your attention to have its center of gravity at the tip of the tailbone. As you're ready, allow your attention to rise. Energy follows attention. As we train our awareness, come to the energy center just below the belly button and hold your attention there. Hold your attention between the breaths. In that space, even as we breathe. And as your attention is here, feel for the relationship between the energy center at the base of the spine and the one below the belly button. Allow yourself to experience both at once. When you're ready, bring your attention to your heart center. And feel for the breath in the center of your chest. And now we'll go back and gather in the center at the solar plexus. The solar plexus is where we store old trauma patterns. And new trauma patterns. But we store trauma patterns in our solar plexus. So sometimes it's a place that our energy would rather skip. Our conscious awareness would rather skip. As we understand from our own experience that different energy centers are more prominent at some times than others. Now feel for the relationship between the solar plexus and the heart. When you're ready, allow your attention to rise to your throat center. Take your attention into the third eye. Feel for the relationship between the throat center and the third eye. And when you're ready, allow your awareness to release out the top of your head. Begin to feel the bigger flow in and around your body. Now holding your awareness in the spiritual body. Gently and slowly allow your eyes to open. Into the experience of two places at once. As human beings, we can't be sure what will happen when we die. But nothing is lost in preparing to participate with sacred energy. It's the greatest gift we can give ourselves in preparing for our future. We welcome your questions. Any reports or experiences you want to share. I should have called in with a blank space this morning. but better to be here than not. And waiting so late that you would all leave before I ever got here. Organization with time has never been my strong suit.
Anyway, you look great.
Oh, thank you. I can say I'm quite healthy. And extraordinarily happy and grateful for everything. Especially you guys being here today, sharing this. I can say astrologically, it's a very not much fun, but who cares? Because where the real fun is inside. And, every time we look outside, we're disappointed. That's the overall experience of being a human on Earth. There's a lot that's okay, but overall, the general experience is there's a lot of disappointment. And we have the best of it. In this culture, we really have the best of everything that's possible for humans in this particular time period. But it's really true that everything in our external life begins in our internal life. And so it's really important, and even more so as we age, to pay attention to what we're cultivating inside ourselves. And of course, there are so many factors that, what our experience is, it's not linear with our internal reality. Nothing is linear in the field of ultimate reality. But we only have one axis of participation, and that's getting to know ourselves as spiritual beings having a physical experience. And the more intent we are about coming into alignment so that we can more fully experience that fact of our spiritual being, the more opportunity we have for participation in that field. Of course, every human being has the capacity to channel spiritual energy in all kinds of ways. We just have different talents through which we do that into the external world. But at a certain point in our lives, that's no longer the issue, is what we can produce in the outside world. But the issue becomes, how great an alignment can we cultivate within ourselves? Moment to moment. as we exit into a different level of participation. There are all kinds of stories about spiritual sages who have chosen to do things like be buried in caves or buried by stones or buried underground, or, all kinds of ways that they would essentially, you would imagine, starve to death or run out of air. And not being afraid to die. And many of those stories are about people who made that choice as their exit plan. And then there's stories of people who, someone close to Inanda, Swami Shalagram, did I say it right, Indra? Who asked to be released. He just wanted to go. And Inanda said yes. And so he just went. We assume he just went in his sleep. Imagine having that power over your body, to just allow yourself to die. Let go. You did everything you needed to do in this world, everything you could, and having the capacity to leave your energy behind. Imagine having the power to make that decision, to leave your energy behind for 500 years so that other people could benefit. Imagine having that conversation with a spiritual teacher. I can't. I have no idea how one would do that. But the very fact that a human being can have that capacity is a reason to aspire to it. And it points to the truth of spiritual practice and cultivating that in ourselves. So, of course, the biggest step is to make ourselves available for allowing greater and greater experience of alignment. Yes.
It strikes me as a challenging time astrologically now, and do you see any shifts in that pattern?
So Andrew's saying it strikes him that this is a challenging time astrologically, and that's the truth, and has been for a while. And he's wondering if that will change. And the truth is that it's changing all the time. And for each of us, it's better and worse in different locations of our chart, which means different arenas of our lives at different times. So one of the things that has been happening is that Mars recently went from Scorpio into Sagittarius. And Scorpio is a water sign, and Sagittarius is a fire sign. And there are 3 places in the chart where this happens. And when it does, there is major agitation in the arena of life that happens for each of us. And so, for example, in my chart, that happens in between my 9th and 10th house, my house of spirituality and my house of career. And so there's a lot of in the last few days in that sort of arena, a lot of upheaval, which is probably why we're thinking about death a lot, because it's very nitty gritty, rubber hits the road territory internally between the house of spiritual belief and the house of career, which is materialization in the world. So do you mind if I use your chart as an example, Andrew? So for Andrew, that's happening between his 2nd house of money and domestic happiness and those are sort of, and speech, those are the themes of the 2nd house. And the 3rd house, which is about music, art, and expression of same. And so those are the arenas where he's having discomfort. So you can see why it's important that people in a partnership not be agitated in the same way at the same time, even though that particular agitating energy is happening for both of us. It's happening in different arenas, so we can be supportive. That's the hope. And so each of us is experiencing that in our own way. And so that's kind of how it works. every house of the zodiac, of which there are 12, each one has certain themes, certain life themes that are activated when planets are going through that house, or when planets live in that house in our natal chart. So, these are sort of basic fundamentals in astrology. But it gives you an idea of how we can't exactly say, we can say there's agitation, but it's going to affect each of us differently. And it unfolds geometrically. It's not exactly linear, because how the houses interact with each other has everything to do with which planets are where, and how they do what's called aspecting, which is when they're looking at each other, they have impact. And different ones have different ways of impacting. So it all gets very complex very quickly. Does that help? So there's more agitation than usual right now, because the darker energies, see, there's such a thing as the natural zodiac, which we all think of as Aries, Taurus, Gemini, in that order. It begins with Aries, it goes all the way around to Pisces. And at this particular time, many of the malefic means, well, it means bad, but it's not, it's like the energies that are more challenging are in the natural zodiac, in places where they're not the happiest. And so when that happens, there's this underlying unhappiness in the field. It's just in the field, in the natural field of things, of beingness. And so that underlying, having more challenging energies in the more expressive, usually positive parts of the horoscope is difficult for everybody. And so that's one way to look at it. And of course, that shifts over time, because everything moves. And, most planets move in a certain direction, just like our gastrointestinal system moves in a certain direction. But then there are things that happen that make planets appear to go backwards in the sky. And so even though they just appear to do that, of course, they don't do that in reality. They continue to move in their orbit. But according to what we experience on the planet, they appear to be going backwards. And that appearance of going backwards is called retrograde, and we experience the planet differently. So, and how differently we experience it depends on, how it's glancing at us or not. And so we each experience it differently. Even twins that are born, 2 minutes apart, they can have totally different experiences, because that much can happen in 2 minutes. Thank you for asking that question. And so we can wake up with a shadow that has nothing to do with anything about our life. And, sometimes we're born with shadows. We're all born with shadows in our chart. And so those shadows, those challenging energies that we're born with, are themes that we learn to live with. And very often they have a powerful impact on our matrix of belief. And of course, where we live has everything to do with our experience too. You know, if we were in Ukraine, it wouldn't matter how great a chart we had, we'd still be living in a war. Or Gaza, or, you know, many, many places we don't even think about every day. We have blessed lives here to have the time and energy to think about and participate in our spirituality. And nobody deserves it, and nobody doesn't deserve it. We're just lucky enough to have it. We don't know why. We don't need to know. And there may not be a why, just luck. Yes. You're muted. You're. Is it working? Let me see if there's anything I can do. Nope. Let me see if you can write it in the chat, if I can read it. Yeah, write it in the chat. You see the little button at the bottom that says chat? Sorry to make you put your glasses on. Is it beneficial to have the chart done monthly? Well, I think it's beneficial to have the chart done yearly and then to ask, when are the difficult and when are the prosperous times? Because it's very easy to get overwhelmed by too much information. And having done that personally for a number of years now, I can say that there is such a thing as too much information. And there's no astrologer that doesn't over time decide to look at the broad strokes, because you can get so confused in the minutiae of the day-to-day patterns that you could sit and do nothing, because there's always a reason not to take a risk. And there's never a reason to, well, that's not true. There are very good times where you can take a risk, and calculated risk. For example, if you want to change your location, it's very important that you check, first of all, there's something called astrocartography, where you check locations that are beneficial to your chart. And then you check the time, usually when Jupiter is really, really good for you in the area of moving, of changing location. And you move at that time to that place. And then you can have some confidence that you're doing something beneficial for yourself. So that's how you can use it. But knowing more information is not necessarily more helpful. Knowing the broad strokes of how this particular year is going to go and what the underlying challenges are, what the underlying benefits are, so that you sort of know which baskets to put your eggs in during the year, like where to put your expectation, where to put your energy. If it's a really great year for making money, then you could think about that, how that could work. If it's a really bad year for making money, then you don't think about that. You think about saving and being frugal. So these are sort of the broad strokes that you can look at. If it's time to travel or if it's time to stay home, those are really important things to know if you're thinking about traveling. It's an astrological weather report. And if we know it's the rainy season, then we're not so shocked when it rains. But, we don't necessarily expect rain in the summer. So it's like that. Does that help? Yes, I can say directly from experience, there's such a thing as too much information. And it's just boggling. Everything starts swirling and crisscrosses. And there are two major planets that everybody looks at for prediction for themes. And one of them is Saturn, which is the slowest moving planet in the sky, aside from the three outer planets, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, which theoretically Vedic astrology doesn't look at. But the people that I study with think that those planets are too powerful to ignore. So they look at them in a certain way in terms of broad strokes, but not as part of not exactly as part of the inner workings of Vedic astrology, but more as extra information about powerful influences in the chart. So Saturn is something you pay attention to because it spends 2.5 years in 130-degree part of the chart. And so where that is going to, things will happen slowly and they're not necessarily good. Saturn is the planet of understanding which will be delivered. Or another way of saying it is karmic experience that can't be denied. And then the next slower moving planet is Jupiter, which is very big and spends a year in a sign. And Jupiter always does good, no matter what. Jupiter is helpful. Jupiter is the planet of wisdom, the planet of abundance and expansion and education and all kinds of good things. And so where Jupiter is for the year is very important because that's going to give you a lot of benefit. So knowing where those two things are is very helpful. Because I'll give you an example again. For me, I have Saturn in my 12th house. The 12th house is the house of meditation and the house of loss in the material world. And so it makes me want to meditate a lot and not pay attention to the material world and run away to India and never come back. And so that happens to be Andrew's, let me see, 5th house. And so that's his house of spiritual expression. And so he's still interested in spirituality, but he doesn't feel a great need to go off and hide from the world. And he's more interested in ritual practice and staying settled. And his 12th house is Virgo, which is Virgo is a lot about perfection and strong intellect. And so he's in a totally different climate in that realm than I am. So this is how people can sort of stabilize each other. when there's strong tendencies pushing us in what may or may not be the highest best. There's no knowing. Hope that's helpful. Yes.
Hey, good morning. So how long should we foresee, little problem areas or feeling a little higher strung than normal?
It's very hard to answer that globally because everything is so individualized when it comes down to the movements of the planet and sky. So
Okay.
it's hard to talk about
Mhm.
without the fundamental knowledge.
Okay.
And yeah. Sorry, I can't answer better.
That's perfectly fine, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. We've, this Saturn in Aquarius has been going on for more than a year now. So we're kind of used to having that heavy energy there. So knowing that that's on for another year is helpful. We don't really expect it to change. But it does change depending on which other planets move through that house at the same time. So it can get better and worse. Like if Jupiter moves through there, it's great. It's not. Jupiter's been in Aries for most of the year. It will go into Taurus in March. And so if you have benefics in Taurus, that'll be wonderful. No matter what you have in Taurus, it will be helpful. Benefics are planets that only do good, and Jupiter and Venus are two benefics. The moon is benefic, and so is Mercury. And the malefics are Saturn and Sun and Mars. And then Rahu and Ketu are the wild cards. Ketu is the planet of enlightenment, but it's also the planet of loss in the material world. And Rahu is the planet of obsessive desire and can give great accomplishment in the material world, give a lot of wealth and power, but not necessarily sanity. So, and these things are powerful on all of us. But the main thing about astrology is it shows us that most of what is going on outside of us, although it influences our experience, we don't have any power over it. None. So we can't feel like we did something wrong. I mean, we can feel like we did something wrong when things don't go well, but that's usually inappropriate, because things don't go well because they don't go well because of a lot of factors that we have little control over. So if we look to our external world to decide the quality of our life, we're always going to be disappointed. And if we're not disappointed, then we're distracted. We're like really involved in something that may be wonderful, but it's distracting us from our inner work. And that's usually when we get distracted, is when the astrology is great and we're having a good time out there, when there's a lot of flow. So most of us come to spiritual work because we don't have a lot of flow in the external world and we've kind of given up, which is not a bad thing in terms of cultivating our spirituality. And so it's kind of a joke that, you know, when you're told you have a great chart for spiritual work, that means that, you know, life in the world is difficult. So we would guess that everybody here in some ways has a difficult chart because we're here. We are spending time cultivating our inner, knowing full well that life has a lot of disappointment to offer. Now, that's certainly not globally true of everybody here. And all of us are at an age where we've experienced quite a bit of happiness as well. And you know, that's the great blessing of living in this country where many parts of our lives are easy. And we have choices. We actually can make choices on a daily basis about what we're going to do today and what we're going to think about, what we're going to read, what we're going to watch on TV, you know, whether or not we have a pet and how many. I mean, we have so much abundance of choice in our daily lives. It's just amazing. So much to be grateful for. To even have this discussion about what's happening around us that is influencing our lives. But the real thing, the real point today is that what we're cultivating is if in fact there is a spiritual life waiting for us on the other side of this material life, that we be prepared to participate. What have we got to lose? And it does make sense because the people who come back tell us all about white light and experience that can be related to. So if we arrive full of love, we have got nothing to lose. Yes. So that's the good news. That's really the good news. Not to mention the fact that when we cultivate our inner life improves. It just does. And it starts to talk to us. It's interesting what I'm being told is that we don't need to wait to die for the white light. The white light is always available. And it's there for us to use and cultivate and understand. It's that as we are departing, we don't have a choice about whether or not we experience white light. While we're here, we have a choice. We can choose a mud puddle of an inner life if we feel like it. You know, we can get self-indulgent in the whatever. We don't even need to talk about it. We all have experienced it. But we always have the choice of the white light. And choosing that immediately changes our resonance, immediately changes our frequency. And it's actually the most important thing to remember is to choose the white light. Okay. Just realizing we have no clock.
11:13.
11:13. That's pretty good. Hmm. We are so happy to be with you. One more question before we meditate some more. How can we help? Well, we're going to wish everybody a very, very happy new year. First of all, that it's really about joy. It's about as much joy as we can possibly cultivate in ourselves. And we can allow it to just bubble up inside us. It just happens. And that's fine. That's a great gift. Best gift we could have for this new year. So much love. Let's meditate on joy. May you all have a joyous, wonderful, wonderful new year. And may it persist for a very long time. Thank you so much for a wonderful year together. Bye for now.